Here we are live once again, week 11 of college football. Myself, Eric Froton, with my co-host, the purveyor of the CFF site, Mike Bainbridge, with his trusty Michigan Wolverines hat. And he's got a jersey on that I can't quite see. Who is the jersey today, Michael? You're moving on my gimmick here.
Yeah, we're going to cover it in just a few minutes. So I will keep the name on the back of the jersey secret just for now.
I like it. A little teaser. That's what we like to see here. We will get right into the late injury news and impact. Blake Corum of Michael's Michigan Wolverines is out. He was tweeting, I saw, from Ann Arbor, and they're on the road today. So that generally means he hasn't traveled with the team. So that is a very good indication he will not be playing, quite obviously. Moving on to TCU, once again, their backfield, go figure. Zach Evans not expected to play yet again. And last week's player who we assumed would be taking all of those snaps, Kendre Miller, got injured very early in that game. And it was the Emery Demarcado show, redshirt senior, relatively unheralded, and had a thoroughly mediocre performance last week. But hey, he's going to be getting the carries. We have to think if Kendre Miller cannot go. And last news bite for this slot, Chez Mellusi out for the season. That's two of Wisconsin's running backs they've been relying upon. Actually, three, if you want to go. So you got Garendo, you got Mellusi. Obviously, you had the deposed week one pseudo starter there, his name eludes me. Who's the clown who ended up he's in the portal?
Oh, Jalen Berger.
Jalen Berger, yes, the nothing Berger. They're all gone. So the deck has been cleared in Wisconsin for Braelon Allen to be the number one running back. We also like probably Julius Davis to get those secondary carries. And they're playing a Northwestern team that has been absolutely run roughshod over in the run game pretty much all season. One of the least experienced teams in the country coming in this year. So you see that they simply haven't coalesced on the defensive side. Michael, thoughts on those news bits?
Yeah, Blake Corum's out, so it's going to be the Hassan Haskins show. I believe true freshman Donovan Edwards did make the trip, so I think he's talented enough to where he'll steal five to seven carries here and there, but I think we're expecting between 20 and 25 carries for Hassan Haskins this week. Penn State, tough matchup, but they're really better against the pass with the top 5 pass defense in the country. Against the run, they're susceptible. I think they have some injuries along the defensive line there. So, it's guaranteed volume. So you definitely want Haskins in your lineup, even though it's a tough matchup on the road. I'm fading the entire TCU offense this week. I know I got burned last week for fading Chandler Morris for 40 points. It's just a free square in DFS that we just did not take advantage of. That pisses me off still to today. But yeah, bad matchup against Oklahoma State, run and pass. They're top 10 in the nation. So fade TCU this week. Wisconsin is interesting because, we assume Braelon Allen is getting most, if not all, the carries now with Chez Mellusi out for the year. How they distribute those carries will be interesting. They've been given around 40 carries a game to Braelon Allen and Chez Mellusi. Do we assume a true freshman is going to get 30 attempts per game? I don't think so. It's possible. It's Wisconsin, right? And he's a bigger back to handle that kind of workload. But, if they give him between 20 and 25, you're leaving 15 carries to go to potentially Julius Davis, who's min-priced on DFS. They're probably going to get Mertz involved a little bit in the run game. He has been a couple of the past few weeks. And then, it's Wisconsin. They'll use their fullbacks here and there to, rumble in the end zone. So, fire up Braelon Allen, obviously, this week in any format. Julius Davis could be a risk, but could be one that pays off.
Yeah, and with the likely game flow against Northwestern being solidly tilted in Wisconsin's favor, I don't think you'll see a Lou Nichols-esque 43 carries that he got there in action over there for Central Michigan. Jim McElwain riding him hard. And then with TCU, yeah, Chandler Morris, obviously, it speaks to, and you and I had this conversation in the preseason as to my distaste for Max Duggan, just simply so inaccurate in the passing game. He's good at running the ball, but my gosh, I'm so frustrated by Max Duggan's, ability to throw the ball downfield and not really take advantage of the skill he has out there with Quentin Johnson, Tay Barber. It really speaks to how ineffective he's been that Chandler Morris comes out and just lights it up in his first week. But I do see, and you and I both have some cash riding on the Chandler Morris under 245.5 prop. So, hopefully Oklahoma State keeps doing what Oklahoma State does, and that was just a rare blip on the screen. Moving on, Max Johnson and Garrett Nussmeler expected to split reps in some fashion, at least in the first half. And then Coach Orgeron had indicated that he's going to ride the hot hand in the second half. That's never good for the incumbent, in my opinion. Whenever we see this sort of thing, we saw it with Henry Columby at Texas Tech. Yeah, we're going to get Donovan Smith in a little bit. 2 series, and then adios, Henry. So that's always something you want to be aware of with LSU. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Another QB situation, Texas. Casey Thompson or the dreaded or on the depth chart, Hudson Card. Both will play for Texas. How much, we don't know. But again, it doesn't look good for Casey Thompson. He got replaced pretty quick last week when he was faltering, and they need to do something to get some consistency out of that offense, because you've seen him for the past month, you've seen Texas do well in the first half and then absolutely get dominated every second half from an offensive point of view and defensive too. It's not just a meme anymore. It's what's happening. This second half adjustments are non-existent. So that's obviously something to look to in order to bolster that offense. And then we're going to stay in Texas, Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. Both of them game time decisions against Kansas in what should be obviously a game that they should handle, but you can't really trust Texas at this point to close out any games. So, Michael, any thoughts on those 3 news bites?
Yeah, if you notice, I am wearing an LSU jersey today. It does say Odell Beckham on the back of the jersey, but let's just pretend I put tape over it, and this is Garrett Nussmeler. Right? This is Garrett Nussmeler jersey, okay? He will replace Max Johnson at some point today, and hopefully for the majority of the game, so we can hit our unders. We're on 261 on DraftKings, 211 on Prize Picks. I'm on the under on.
It was 261 in DraftKings. That's off the board now. They took that Mac Johnson off the board after we took it to the woodshed as soon as those lines dropped yesterday. But yes, absolutely. Salient point.
So I'm wearing the LSU colors today in support of Garrett Nussmeler, hoping that, I think he's the better quarterback of the two. Max Johnson has talent, but, he's just been struggling with, he's got a decimated wide receiver core, but he struggles with pressure, doesn't really throw the deep ball all that well. So, I'm hoping Nussmeler gets his chance to shine at some point this week against Arkansas, and then just shines and rolls with that offense for the rest of the game. With regard to Texas, with the quarterbacks, I think I'm just fading it entirely. If we somehow get word that Casey Thompson's out, I believe he has a hand or a wrist injury. If we get word that it's going to be Hudson Card for the entirety of the game, he's 5,500 on DraftKings. So could be playable there against a really weak Kansas defense. In the backfield, we don't have word, obviously, on if Bijan or Roschon will play this week. Do they need them against Kansas? Probably not. Keelan Robinson, the Alabama transfer, likely the guy to step into that starting role if those two are out, 3,500 on DraftKings. So, that's almost a free square right there in your lineups. Should run roughshod against Kansas. So, sounds like they might mix in Jonathan Brooks, a true freshman, as well. So both of those guys might be in play if Bijan and Roschon are out.
Absolutely. Keelan Robinson, highly touted prep recruit, should be able to fill in against a soft Kansas defense. Moving on to the next set of info, Tyler Shuck. Welcome back, Tyler Shuck, with a collarbone injury, injured in week 2. We haven't seen him for a long time. And obviously Donovan Smith, who we just mentioned, who has taken the snaps since Matt Wells got fired, and his Utah State transfer Binky boy, Henry Colomby, finally got jettisoned by Sonny Cumbie. It's kind of speaks volumes that Cumbie obviously didn't want Henry Colomby behind center, but Matt Wells is the head coach. Wasn't much he could do, and he sort of indicated that it could be Shuck or Donovan Smith playing there for Texas Tech. Over there in Virginia, Brennan Armstrong, we saw what happened against BYU 2 weeks ago, okay, in that mega shootout. He gets hit, lands on his right side, very next play gets up, throws an interception, and he comes off the field and said, no less than a dozen times, it's broken, it's broken, it's broken. And then we didn't see him again, obviously, because that was the end of his day. He was cryptic in an interview I saw earlier this week about whether or not he would play. That's never a good thing. And we saw how Sean Clifford, when he had allegedly broken ribs, the week after when he played Illinois, we saw him in severe pain throughout the entire game. His throwing was affected. That's something you certainly want to be aware of. And I mean, they're playing Notre Dame, which is obviously got a pretty darn good pass defense. And you want to be obviously aware about it. Also, his safety valve, Billy Kemp, also questionable. He came out of that game as well in the second half. So you're talking about a key cog in that offense, the number one slot receiver. He's the guy that they look to underneath to get him in space and to get the first downs, keep the chains moving while they'll take shots with Dontavian Wicks and Roschon Henry on the outside. So him being out, that's definitely something to be aware of. And you could probably expect to see more of converted quarterback, our friend, Mr. Virginia's own what's his name?
Thompson.
Thompson. Mr. Thompson over there. So I expect to see him get a heavy workload. The problem is he's listed at quarterback everywhere. Like Fantrax has got him at quarterback still, despite the fact that he hasn't taken a quarterback snap in weeks. So once again, Fantrax, stay hot. And lastly, Stanford, Tanner McKee, questionable to doubtful. I think it's probably likely he isn't going to play. He didn't play last week, and we saw what happened against Utah. They got absolutely barebacked by the Utes, just totally emasculated. Their run game has been terrible all season. Nathaniel Pete had, showed some flashes, but Austin Jones, man, he was a guy who was, at least a top 20 running back heading into the season. I mean, I don't know where you guys have him ranked this week, but I have to think it's on the very, very low end of starting running backs, maybe in the 60s or 70s in terms of what you can expect out of him. So this Stanford offense, listless. Also, you got some receivers, Elijah Higgins, John Humphrey. Both of them are considered questionable. Both of them didn't play last week. This is an offense in disarray that is in some trouble. Michael, thoughts on those news bites?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually have over 40.5 rushing yards for Austin Jones this week. I know, again, Stanford's terrible.
The fact that it's just at 40.5 speaks volumes.
Yeah, right. That you tell us that line in week one that he's going to be at 40.5. I wouldn't have believed it. But I mean, Oregon State's marginal run defense. It seemed like Austin Jones was getting the bulk of the work last week when they were splitting between him and Nathaniel Pete, I believe, is the backup. So kind of like the over 40.5 for Austin Jones. For the Virginia offense, that there was some line movement last night. I believe it's now up to 6.5 in favor of Notre Dame, and that line dropped. Whatever the point total was, I don't have that up in front of me, but might be an indication that we don't see Brennan Armstrong this week. It sounds like Jay Woolfolk, freshman, would get the nod if Armstrong does not start. Downgrade all the receivers. I don't have an update on Billy Kemp. Not sure if he's going to go, but you downgrade the receivers with a true freshman starting at quarterback. Doesn't sound like they'll change the offense much with Woolfolk in there as opposed to Armstrong. But, I think this guy was a baseball player in high school, so we don't even have stats really to rely on to see what kind of quarterback this guy could be. So, Armstrong out, that downgrades everybody on the Virginia offense.
Absolutely. And I have Dontavian Wicks on my 20-team CFP winning edge team where I'm playing in against every kiss begins with Chris K as the commercial goes. So I'm hoping, I pretty much have to roll him out. I'm hoping he catches a deep shot there because there's such deep rosters, a 20-team league. I'm just going to kind of go with it. And to kind of dovetail on that Notre Dame UVA game, one of my plays of the week for sides, Notre Dame -6, like Mike said, it's creeping up to -6.5 in some places. I was actually on the Extra Edge show on Monday where I go over the early lines and games I like. And this is the game that I pointed to at the time. It was -4.5 where it opened at. I predicted that it would be getting closer to 7. I think we might reach 7 by game time, especially if we hear that Brennan Armstrong is out. You might want to take that 6 now. It will go to 7, maybe even go over the hook if Armstrong doesn't play. Obviously, we talked about Wicks. Notre Dame has looked a lot better over the past few weeks since their loss to Cincinnati, which looks even worse after Cincinnati is not really impressed the past 2 weeks. USF last night, we saw big plays they hit against them. Had terrible time tackling, getting a hold of Timmy McClain. They were able to get pressure. They just weren't able to bring it home. And same against Tulsa. They needed 2 different goal line stands against a listless Tulsa team. So, but that being said, Notre Dame looking a lot better, looked good in recent weeks. And I think with a rejuvenated Kyren Williams, who our producer Matt is a big fan of here, I think he is going to have his way with UVA. And at $8,200 on DraftKings, I think that's a pretty good, solid core play. And I also like Boston College -2 with the return of the jerk, Phil Jurkovec. I mean, they were able to take out Virginia Tech. Obviously, Virginia Tech is known for their defense. They have a good D, and they were able to put up 17 points, but held them to just within single digits in terms of their scoring. Virginia Tech, just a terrible offense. I mean, it can't really do much of anything behind Braxton Burmeister. And I think that really turns around. They're only 2-point dogs against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, while they can score points, their defense is pitiful. And they have not been doing very well in terms of the past few games. I think they're 1-4 over their last 4 games. And I believe they're even like 1-3 in terms of against the spread over that span. They're not covering. They're scoring points, but they can't stop anybody. And I think week 2 of Jurkovec, they're going to be able to do a lot more behind that Frank Cignetti offense, and they're going to handle Georgia Tech pretty easily. I think that -2 is a great line. So those are the 2 games I like. Michael, your side for the week.
Yeah, I like two plays in this game, but I went with under 55 for UTEP and North Texas. We have injuries to monitor here with DeAndre Torrey potentially out, Jacob Cowing for UTEP potentially out. So that's why I went under with 55, but I also like -1 with UTEP here because I do think they're the better team. North Texas, if they're without Torrey, their best offensive player, they've shown they can't throw worth a damn, even despite this 2-game mini win streak that they're on. So I think UTEP is the better team here. I would play the under 55 before the -1, but I like both plays this week.
Sounds good. Moving on to DFS, DraftKings, core 2 plays for the main. I have Aidan O'Connell at $5,400 is a really cheap option there at Purdue. I mean, gosh, if you're looking in that super flex spot and you want to try to fit some of these running backs, the high octane running backs, more dependable wide receivers, so you don't have to kind of go with the high variance plays on the wideouts. Aidan O'Connell at Superflex, $5,400 paired with a high-end quarterback. I think that's a great way to go. All they do is throw the ball. As Mike has dutifully pointed out innumerable times on this very show, Purdue doesn't run the ball very well at all, and when they use their running backs is typically as those safety valves or on screens to Xander Horvath, who's now back, King Doru, and they're not out there pounding it up the middle. It's just simply not what they do. This is a Jeff Brom-led offense, and we saw what he did for years and years at Western Kentucky, the Brandon Doughty era, and now at Purdue. That's what they do. They throw the ball. Maybe O'Connell gets into some trouble and throws some interceptions, but I think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit against obviously a good Ohio State defense, but one that can be thrown upon. in the right circumstances. And I think with an upset-minded Purdue, they will be able to do that. And next, Marvin Mims, Oklahoma, $6,400. Pretty good deal considering what we're looking at for this slate. When he is hit big, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 of the last 4 games. You have to figure that Oklahoma is going to have to score. They're the 10th rated passing offense overall in the country. And they're playing a Baylor team who is surprisingly, is pretty passive in the air. I believe they're like 64th or so ranked in terms of overall team performance when you get into all those metrics, allowing 8.5 yards per pass. And they're a pretty good offense too. That's the thing. It's even though this is a Dave Aranda-led team, one of the great defensive minds of the past decade or so, this is a team that is very proficient offensively, excellent running attack behind Abram Smith and Tristan Ebner, and Tyquan Thornton has proven to be a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. So I think you can see more points than you might be accustomed to in this game. And Marvin Mims being the deep threat, being the big hit artist, he is a great boomer bust type play, and I think he's more trending towards a boom. I think he scores here. Michael, your core 2 plays.
Yeah, I like Jordan Travis this week for Florida State. I think in bigger GPPs, Aidan O'Connell and Talia Tagovailoa are going to see really high ownership. So I do like to fade them potentially in larger GPPs. Jordan Travis still cheap at 6,900, so you can still pair him up with either some high-priced running backs or a high-priced quarterback. Miami defense allowing 30.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks this season. Travis, when he was the starter previously, before being out last week, he had 2 100-yard rushing performances. We've even seen progression as a passer. He's got 63% completion rate on the season, I believe. And good news is with Travis is you really don't have to pair him with any receiver. They don't have a target hog at receiver Florida State. And, he's not gonna get you fantasy points for the most part via the pass, right? So just stick him in your lineup. You can play him naked. Don't have to pair him with anybody else. And if you get, 20 to 25 fantasy points, I think we have him projected at 24 fantasy points this week. Exactly what you want at 6,900. Second play, not going to go into it too deeply, but Braelon Allen, we've already covered it with the Wisconsin running backs. I have him in the majority of my lineup. He's going to get 20 carries. Worst rush defense in the Big Ten Northwestern. Fire him up this week.
Absolutely. And speaking of Miami, their defense is not the Miami defense we're accustomed to. First off, Bubba Bolden's out, but you get into points per drive. 2.5 points per drive. That's 91st in the country and 85th when it comes to explosive play rate. That's a bad mark. And also for props purposes, man, Jordan Travis came out at 118.5 in terms of his passing yards. He's gone over that every single game that he started. An absolute miss by DraftKings. On the bargain bin on the main, we talked about it at length already. Wisconsin, Julius Davis, min priced at $3,000. I think he gets double-digit carries. I mean, they're not gonna give Braelon Allen 40 carries. Michael would like that, considering he's got him in all his lineups, understandably so. But at min price, Julius Davis, if you're going studs and duds and you need to slot somebody at $3,000 so you can get all those other guys that you like in there, go for it. And also on UCF side, Isaiah Bowser leaves the game again last week because that's what Isaiah Bowser does. The man gets injured. He's done it literally for 4 years, being at Northwestern, at Florida. He's always injured, okay? So when he leaves the game last week, even though we haven't had a lot of news about it, I have no faith in him playing. At $4,600, Johnny Richardson will get the overwhelming bulk of the carries. He's proven to be capable. He's not as big as Bowser, but he's versatile, and he's proven to be very capable in that situation when starting against an SMU team that has given up some points recently. They're on a 2-game slide, and they're not looking like that unstoppable juggernaut that they were of 2 weeks ago after getting thumped by Houston. So, and by Memphis for that matter. So, give Johnny Richardson a shot. Mike, your bargain bin on the main.
Yeah, that's an injury I'm definitely looking for prior to game time if Bowser's out, because I love Richardson as a flex play, as a third running back in our lineups. He's not going to see 20 carries if Bowser's out. That's just not the type of running back he is, but he could see 20 touches maybe with like 15 carries, 5 receptions. So love that play as a flex. if we get word that Bowser's out. Ulysses Bentley, another running back in that same game. I get it, the hesitation. He's been in the lineup. He gets injured. They're touting him as full go, and he barely plays. So it's a risk, but reading and listening to some SMU podcasts, I believe Bentley is going to be a go today, and he's going to be full go. So again, got to check pregame to see the status here. He's got one of those injury tags on the DFS site, so I think he'll see low ownership. If he is a full go, I think he can easily pay off that 3,700 with low ownership. And then I always choose guys with names I struggle to pronounce. Chigoziem Okonkwo. Believe I'm saying that right.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Coming off a career best performance last week, 12 receptions, 85 yards, 15 targets for a tight end. Not only do you like that, you love the matchup, right? Michigan State, worst pass defense in the Big Ten. I think worst pass defense in the entire country now, giving up the most yards per game. It's not just that. They're giving up the second most fantasy points in the country to opposing tight ends this season. We saw that a couple weeks ago with Eric All from Michigan, who had 10 receptions for 98 yards. So Maryland can't run the football these days. I don't think they're going to find success against Michigan State. So I think we could see between 30 and 40 passes from Talia to Tagovailoa this week. So I love Okonkwo as a kind of a cheap play at wide receiver spot.
Sounds good. Moving on to the evening slate. Core 2 plays. I like Devin Leary at $7,600. Now, Leary opened up on DraftKings at 253.5 in terms of his passing yards. That's bumped up into the 277 range, I believe, at last look. So you see which way that is trending in terms of the public, just on the props. But keep in mind, they're playing Wake Forest here, okay? Wake Forest, in terms of their defense, it's pretty much a meme at this point, and they have been getting lit on fire the past few weeks. 108th in explosiveness per play, 118th with a 48.5% success rate against. I mean, this is a team that just simply cannot stop anybody, but they score. So, props to them. That's what I like to see when we're dealing with a quarterback, a team that is hopefully going to get scored upon. Even though NC State is very good defense, Wake Forest has proven to be pretty much impenetrable. And then they're going to have to in turn throw because, as Mike has pointed out before dutifully, their rushing offense is leaving much to be desired, ranked 51st in terms of overall performance on the rushing side, while their passing offense is ranked 22nd. So I think they sincerely lean on that heavily. And then Treylon Burks for Arkansas. Obviously, he huge hands. We've heard all about him. He's getting almost 5 carries a game, it seems, at this point. They're game planning him ways to get him the ball. He is the best player on that offense. He's going to be heavily targeted. I see him getting double-digit targets this week. They're going to have to throw a little bit, I think even a little more than usual, where they have that hodgepodge of running backs there in the backfield. At $6,900, I believe he's like 10th in terms of, or 8th to 10th in terms of price. I think that's a pretty good deal considering this is an elite wide receiver who is pretty much matchup proof. Michael, core 2 plays evening.
Yeah, we've covered these guys before, so I'll go through these quick. Kyren Williams, you're going against the 122nd team against the run in Virginia. He's averaging 26 touches per game over the last month. We have him projected at 30 fantasy points this week. I think he's there's cheap running backs on this night slate. I'll cover them, some of those later, but I mean, he's a guy that's going to get you 30 points via the run or the pass. So I think you got to lock him in this week. And then Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, this guy is just a target hog. He's got 40% of the target share for Kentucky, 48 targets in the last 3 games alone. Favorable matchup against Vanderbilt. And if you look back at some of the favorable matchups for Kentucky in earlier this season, I know UL Monroe sticks out. They'll still pass it, right? They're not just going to lean on the run and ground and pound. So they'll still pass it with Will Levis. So I do like Wan'Dale Robinson and his counterpart, Josh Ali, this week.
Josh, I am the greatest. Well, maybe not Josh Ali, but Muhammad. We're getting to the bargain bin now. I'm going to go with, and I know it's a bold play, but it looks like Jason, Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson himself is very questionable to play. I think, it's entirely possible he will not play in this evening slate. We should get news on that. And if he isn't, well, Jalon Daniels is $4,900. That's about as cheap as you can find for a guy who would be a starting quarterback on this slate. I mean, we're shooting down, but this is the evening. And in the evening slate, as we talked about, you have a lot of conjecture with quarterback. You got the Texas game. You got the LSU game. You got Texas Tech. What are they doing? So this evening slate, you don't have a lot of games to work with, and you have a lot of, up and down quarterback situations. If Mr. Bean is eliminated, I think that Jalon Daniels against a Texas defense that, we talked about it, 106th in explosiveness on the defensive side, 101st in terms of success rate, 101st in terms of yards per play allowed, 6.2 yards per play. That is simply not going to get the job done. I'm not afraid of the Texas defense. I don't think anybody should be. And keep in mind, Daniels came in last game. It's pretty good. 13 of 19 passing, 105 yards, a touchdown. And we've seen him, have dual threat ability, which is the lifeblood of the DFS world, So I think if you're going real studs and duds, you want to go down the box, fine. Go with that 4,900 for Jalon Daniels. And then Justice Ellison, Wake Forest, we saw Christian Beal-Smith leave the game with a lower leg injury, hobbled off, had to be helped off, did not return. I'm always concerned when I see that, all right? Because then Ellison got 13 carries for about 80 yards thereafter. He's proven to be the number 2 guy. He's taken over for Notre Dame transfer Christian Turner, who I believe is just above min price. I think he's 3,500. You could also take a look there if you do have faith in him. But at $4,400 for a starting running back, if obviously the aforementioned Christian Beal-Smith is out, and I'm trending towards thinking he won't be playing, or if he is, he's going to be limited. I think Justice Ellison at $4,400 is a pretty darn good deal at that rate. Michael.
I am going to disagree with one of your selections.
I think I know which one.
It's strategy. Look, DraftKings messed up on the salaries here because we have some dirt cheap running backs. So my strategy is I'm spending up everywhere I can at wide receiver and quarterback because they screwed up the pricing on running backs. Dominique Johnson for Arkansas is $3,000. Yep. He's starting. He's 3,000. He rushed for 100 yards last week, and you just read the quotes. Arkansas is sold on giving this guy the running back 1 job for the foreseeable future. He's averaging nearly 8 yards a carry in his limited attempt so far. Am I scared a little bit with the LSU defense? I mean, they held Alabama to under 10 yards rushing last week. But I think that's more of a one-off performance. You're getting a guy that's going to get 15 carries in a really strong running game for Arkansas. It's a free square. You have to jam him in your lineups. And the next play, I touched on it before already, Keelan Robinson, 3,500. If he gets a start, I think he's actually a better play than Dominique Johnson just because of the opponent, where Dominique's going on the road to face LSU. We get Keelan Robinson against Kansas. I actually like him better than Dominique Johnson, but I mean, it's fire him up if Roschon and Bijan are both out.
Can't argue with either of those. So I do like so and then I shoot power offense still 2,500. Bang. Okay, I'm back. Promo code BetSpurts for prize picks. If you want to go in there, if you want to play some of these plays, we've been better than we were last week. Didn't have a great week, but the previous 3 weeks, we went literally 12-0 on our plays. So hopefully we'll get back on the train. This week, I like Will Rogers, 310.5 passing yards. That's a smoking deal. He's gone over that. I want to say 7 of the past 9. The only ones he hasn't was a week 1 game where he went 289 against NC State, and then 300 against Alabama. I mean, okay, fine, Alabama 300. But if you go over to DraftKings right now and you try to bet that over, I believe it's at 343.5, which is just a ton of line value here, which is, I mean, 343.5 is where it should be. 310.5, simply too low for Will Rogers. All they do is throw. This is a Mike Leach quarterback. That's a straight go. And then the aforementioned Boston College, Phil Jurkovec, only 17.5 points against Georgia Tech. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? This is Georgia Tech's defense, okay? I'm not afraid of Georgia Tech in any way, shape, or form. I watched enough of it until my eyes started bleeding and I couldn't watch anymore, okay? When it comes to the passing defense, they're ranked 124th in the country when it comes to the passing. They're allowing 9.2 yards per pass, okay? All you got to do is put it in the air a few times. And plus, Jurkovec can run a little bit. You know, I think in week 2, you know, he, like we talked about with Virginia Tech, he was getting himself together. I think he rights the ship and he blows away 17.5 points. Michael, your 2 Prize Picks plays.
Yeah, I got under on Brian Robinson, 117.5 rushing yards. If you look back to the G5 opponents that Alabama faces, it's pretty consistent. You're going to get around 200 passing yards, 3 touchdowns from whoever was at quarterback that year. But when you look at the rushing stats, they really try and spread it around their backfield to some of their younger guys. Alabama's already lacking depth with, who was their backup earlier in the year who's out for the season that I can't recall now. But either way, you're probably looking at under 10 carries for Brian Robinson this week to preserve his health. So I do like the under at 117.5 rushing yards.
McClellan.
There you go. Jace McClellan, he's out for the year. So I think they're going to try and preserve his health and not ride him too much against an inferior opponent. And then Kai Thomas, under 61.5 rushing yards. You're facing a top 10 rush defense in Iowa. You're going to be splitting carries with Marquise Irving. Real quick, you look back at the opponents that have had success against Iowa, they tend to throw it, okay? 3 teams, Northwestern, Penn State, and Purdue, all at 40 passing attempts. So I think maybe Minnesota will try the same this week. So I like the under there with Kai Thomas.
Sounds good. All right. In terms of one last big mover, on DraftKings yesterday morning, Caleb Williams came out at 227.5. My gosh, he's all the way up to 279.5. If you got Caleb Williams at 227.5, you have a major middle opportunity at the very least. Yes, we did, Michael. Yes, we did. It was in my column. That is just a sacrilegious line. Can't happen again, but here we are. That was, a 52-yard move. These are the type of things that happen in player props that just don't happen on sides. So you want to be aware of that. You want to be on top of that. Next Friday, lines dropped in the morning. They've been going at like 1 p.m. They dropped in the morning this past Friday. So certainly you want to keep an eye on my Twitter feed, Mike's Twitter feed, for how that drops, because I'll have that out as soon as I possibly can. That being said, my name, Eric Froton at CF Froton. My co-host, Mike Bainbridge, purveyor of the CFF site. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great Saturday.
Come on, Garrett Nussmeler.